Hello there, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another episode of CookieCast. Today on CookieCast, it's the football podcast, and the season's drawing to a close. Well, for some, if you don't talk about the playoffs, that's right, playoff football coming down the line. Before that, there are games to go through, though, so sit tight, strap yourselves in. Get ready for some football games. Last week's to go through and this week's to predict. Before we start, please do consider like, share, subscribe and comment. Drop reviews where you can drop reviews. And share the podcast around. It's the best way to get that word out there. Right, let's get started. Here we go. This is CookieCast, the football podcast.
Recording in progress.
Ah yes, ladies and gentlemen, your favourite person has spoken her immortal words once again and brought you in to the weekly CookieCast football podcast with myself, our esteemed colleague from Hull, Mr. Stuart Woodmansey. How are you, sir?
Not very bad, to be honest. Thank you very much.
Excellent, we'd like to hear it. Our esteemed correspondent covering Nottingham Forest, but not based in the Nottinghamshire area, is Mr. Matthew Moore. How are you, sir?
Good.
Excellent stuff. And for this week, last week, and possibly even next week, Bermondsey sort of native, Andrew Cook, ladies and gentlemen. How are you, sir?
I'm well, thank you.
There he is. He's basking in the glory of being able to hear the Bow Bells and his chimney sweeping away like the little scamp that he is. Obviously, because he's decided to play a cockney for the remainder of the weeks of the season. And as it is, we'll start with the game that Mr. Cook selected as part of the new feature we'll be bringing in starting next season, but we're giving it a trial run for the last couple of weeks of this season. So, Andy had selected Millwall and their game away at Blackpool. Now, have you seen said game, Mr. Cook, or have you seen at least the goals from said game?
I have not. I have let my newly acquired side down by not partaking in seeing or checking the score.
Well, did either of our two esteemed colleagues see the game or see the goals?
Yeah, a little bit after. Say, and I know this is coming, not to foreshadow too much. After me saying that, Andy built the game up so clearly there was going to be nothing in it. There was quite a lot of goals. Just the five.
To pull back the curtain somewhat, obviously, jumping slightly ahead in the predictions, Mr. Woodmansey, of course, had gone for a 0-0 prediction. So after 2 minutes of the game kicking off, he sent a wonderful text to our group text, our group chat, saying, so that 0-0 can get in there bin then. As Millwall took the lead on 2 minutes with a goal from Tom Bradshaw. Blackpool actually equalised on 36 minutes with a penalty from Jerry Yates.
Who would have thought that Millwall would be a team that would do some dirty tackling in the box? It was a definite pen as well.
It's a wonder that we all just have to sort of get through at some point in life. Excuse me. Millwall retook the lead on the 59th minute with a second goal of the game from Tom Bradshaw. But Blackpool equalised again on the 67th minute with a goal from Lewis Fiorini.
I'll tell you what, though, as well. Them two goals, the second Bradshaw goal was a lovely little dink over the keeper after a cracking pass, through ball, split the defence, and I mean, let's be fair, not a professional footballer, but I'd have been tempted to just absolutely batter it at that point. And he had the foresight to just dink it over the keeper, and it was one of them annoying ones for the defenders where if they were like half a foot taller, they'd have been able to scoop it off the line, but it just trickled just out of reach and went through. So it was a lovely little finish. But the kid, what did he say his name was for Blackpool?
Fiorini.
That was a hell of a strike. It was a long way out. It was definitely outside the 18-yard box, and it was hit with such power that it stayed off the ground, but only about an inch the whole way that it went, and it just pinged it into the bottom left-hand corner. The keeper had no chance, but I don't think anybody would have expected him to shoot from there. But it was a good finish, that.
Very nice. Sadly, for Blackpool's perspective, Zian Fleming popped up with a winner for Millwall in the 75th minute. It was another penalty. This one was it? I mean, did you see it? Was it a penalty?
It was a penalty, and Blackpool were fighting for their lives in this game, weren't they? Because they were needing a result to stay up. And for all the good that he'd done, the Fiorini who pinged in that absolute worldly minutes before actually gave away the penalty. So he'd given him a lifeline by drawing him level, and then absolutely stacked it by chopping the Millwall guy down in the box. It definitely was a penalty. It was a late tackle, but Millwall were somewhat out of form before this game, needing to find a little bit coming into the playoffs. And
certainly were. As we covered in the last week's podcast, Millwall went into this one with 1 win in 5. Ironically enough, Blackpool were actually the form side of the two, with 2 wins in their previous 5 games. But like Stu said, Blackpool needed the win in this one to stave off the spectre of relegation for at least another week to take it to the final game of the season. And as there were no more goals, sadly, that was not the case. Blackpool becoming the first team to be relegated from the Championship this season. From a predictions perspective, obviously we'd said before, Mr. Woodmansey had gone for a 0-0 draw, so he doesn't get any points on that one.
Do I not get a bonus point for being the only one of the 4 of us who watched the game?
Well, I would have probably watched it if I'd have had the time, but I was out all weekend, so I sadly was unable to fulfil my duty.
I'm just hearing excuses here. Just excuses.
It is a boatload of excuses.
I'm just hearing bragging.
So Stu, sadly, no points from that one for the 0-0. Matt had gone for a 1-0 home win, so doesn't get the result right, but he did have Yates to score, so gets himself a point for a scorer. I had gone for a 1-1 draw, so sadly, no points for the result. But I did have Yates to score for Blackpool and Bradshaw to score for Millwall, so I managed to bag 2 points from a scorer's perspective. Excuse me. Mr. Cook, obviously it was his team, therefore he had gone for his team to win 2-0, so he gets himself a point for the fact that his team won. He also gets a bonus point because he had picked Bradshaw and Watmore to score. So bags himself a bonus point for that particular goal scorer. So after the first game, Stu get to score, Matt with the 1 point, myself and Andy 2 points each. Our second game of the week took us back up into the Premier League, where obviously Middlesbrough are striving to get to, and it takes us to Brentford versus Nottingham Forest. How did this one play out in the end, Mr. Moore?
After a bit of I think it was a tense first half. Kind of pretty tense. Like Forest played well, but not kind of, this seems to be their way. The other team has most of the possession. They defend, hit on the counter attack, and again pulled off. So in first half stoppage time, take the lead through Danilo. So like £60 million signing in January. It's kind of really found his feet in the past few games, I think. And from that point, kind of hung on, but then kind of watching a bit of the highlights, listening to the report, hang on seems to be kind of a bit of a kind of Forest doing a bit of Forest a bit of disservice. I think they played quite well until the 80th minute, where Ivan Toney popped up to score the equaliser. Bit of poor defending to give away the free kick. Bit of poor defending with the free kick, the end of the wall jumping instead of standing still, and then a bit of poor goalkeeping as well. Don't want to feel it. I feel like a broken record. I think this is the third week on the bounce where I made some kind of reference to Navas making goalkeeping errors. Now, fair enough. If you're having like 50 shots peppered at you during the match, that's fine. But when you kind of give it the big licks, when you come to a club, you kind of got to kind of live up to that kind of thing. Unfortunately, after Toney scored, Danilo had to go off injured. It seemed to be pretty instant that they were going to take him off, leaving Forest to cling on to the draw, which would have taken them out of the relegation zone. Annoyingly, the 3 points would have taken them out of the relegation zone and quite a bit way up the table. A draw would have taken them out of the relegation zone and kept them out of the relegation zone, with results that have happened since. Unfortunately, 4 minutes into injury time, down to 10 men, defending like God knows what, De Silva popped up and snatched away any points, which I think someone said, I think I read somewhere, Forest have lost 23 points from winning positions this season, which is kind of explains where we are. It's alright, because Big Sam has sent us a warning today anyway, because he's as good as Pep and Jurgen Klopp. And anybody else want a name? Unfortunately a 2-1 defeat. So what looked like a priceless win, and then a disappointing but priceless point, has then turned into nothing but a good old, oh, you played really well, and I think Forest is great, from, was he Frank, who's the Brentford kind of thing, and apparently the chairman of Forest was furious. Join everybody else in that one, mate, because we're all furious about that one. I think we talked about it, because obviously I was confused as you can make 5 substitutions, but as Mr. Williams explained to me, you can only make them 3. You can only do 3 substitutions. So you can bring 5 players on, but you can only do it in lumps of 3.
Yeah, so the way that it was explained that I found was that basically you get what's known as 3 substitution windows. So obviously you can make up to 5 changes, but obviously if you just make 3 individual one-on, one-off substitutes at 3 different times during the game, that takes up your 3 allotted substitution windows. The only time that you'd be able to bring another player on is if the guy coming off has suffered a concussion at that point. So that's where the sort of the concussion substitute comes in, as like the extra substitution.
This might be a redundant question, because I'm not sure that you would necessarily know the answer, but why is that?
I think they tried to implement it as so obviously they brought the extra substitutions thing in as a trial period during when they restarted it after COVID, because I think the idea was that players were not going to be as fit because they had this big break, so they were doing it to sort of lessen the impact on players. And I think the reason why they limited it to 3 substitution windows was that there wasn't the opportunity for like managers to time waste at the end of games. So like if you've not used in times gone by, if you hadn't used your 3 subs, you'd normally use them within like the last 5 to sort of 8 minutes of the game to try and break up any sort of possession and play that a team that might be chasing the game has. And stuff like that. So I think the idea was that was going to stop that from happening, basically.
I think in a way you kind of think, he was injured, so realistically there could be some kind of adjustment for him being injured, but then how do you prove that players are actually injured?
Yeah.
But for me, if you're gonna do that, then they should go right, because isn't it they add 30 seconds on for every sub in theory? Just like, right, if you're bringing on subs in added time, that's 2 minutes onto the end of the game. I think they should just let them use all 5 subs, but go right. If you're gonna be a dickhead and bring on two players in separate incidents after the 90 minutes is up and we're into added time, fuck you, mate. It's going to be 2 minutes for the first one, then 3 minutes for the next one, then you've got an extra 5 minutes to defend and you've got nothing you can do about it. Like in that would be my kind of theory, would be, yeah, fair enough, maybe Forest would have been like, well, we'll take the risk of not to. Then you've got to be that, right, well, right, we won't risk an extra 2 minutes because that gives them, they can build that momentum again. But yeah, I mean, fine. It just seemed bizarre. I was like, hang on, we've only done 3 substitutes, and then you couldn't. Yeah. So yeah, apparently he was furious, and other Forest fans were furious that he'd wasted the substitution things. But I think 1 or 2 of them might have been injury based anyway. So yeah.
Yeah, not the best, obviously. From a league perspective, leaves Forest after the result in the Everton-Leicester game on Monday. Does leave Forest now back in the bottom 3, sadly. From a predictions perspective, Mr. Cook, in his usual guise, had gone for an optimistic 1-0 away win, with Johnson to score the goal, so sadly, no points for Mr. Cook there. All 3 of us, in the other regard, were so close to points as we'd all gone for a 1-1 draw. Grrr, so close. I picked Gibbs-White to score for Forest. Stuart and Matt had both picked Johnson. Stuart had picked Mbuemo, or Burmo. No one really knows at this particular point. I don't even know if he's come out himself and actually given the pronunciation of his name, but we'll tune in next week and we'll find out. Myself and Matt had both picked Tony to score for Brentford, so we do get ourselves a little bonus point there. So, point for myself, point for Matt. After 2 games, Stu still yet to score. Matt and Andy on 2 points, and I have taken a slight lead with 3 points. Our next game takes us over to Mr. Woodmansey's boys, where it was Hull City's final home game of the season, where they took on Swansea City. Now, how did this one pan out in the end, sir?
Well, again, another bumper home crowd. The owners doing their magic with the ticket prices again. So a good portion of the stands were filled, including the West Upper open again, which is nice to see. And the big crowd were rewarded after only 3 minutes of the game, where the pass from Seri out to Harry Vaughan on the left starts driving into the box. Sees Tufan coming near post, puts a peach of a ball into him, and rather than Tufan getting to bash it into the net, Cabango, one of the defenders from Swansea, thought, do you know what, I'll have a go for him, and chested it into his own net. So it was an own goal. He's like, no, I've listened to the podcast, I know Matt picked him, he's not having any points this week. So Cabango picked it out his own net, and it was looking fairly comfortable for the most part. Until Swansea decided that actually it's nearly half time, maybe we should start putting some moves together. So from what I've seen of Swansea this season, they have actually been a reasonable passing side, and when they get going they seem to have it down, and unfortunately City were subjected to that on 39 minutes. There's a lovely curled finish after a sweeping team move from pretty much the halfway line across the park 2 or 3 times, and then put into the net by Kundal. Now, Kundal has scored twice this season for Swansea. Does anybody want to guess who his other goal was against? All right, that's right, it was also Hull, dickhead.
I would definitely have just guessed Rotherham or something just to piss you off there.
Yeah, thanks. But no, because clearly him scoring against us to take away those points on the final home game of the season wasn't enough to annoy me, Paul. You felt like you had to potentially rub yet more salt into that wound. However, it kind of is Hull that maybe had the last laugh in this game because they had absolutely Jeff all to play for. But Swansea being held to a draw means that they cannot reach the playoffs. So another team eliminated, and at least you don't have to go to Wales to see your team lose now, Paul. So you're all good?
Yeah! So, as Mr. Woodmansey alluded to there, yes, Swansea eliminated from post-season contention. Predictions-wise, Stuart gone for the optimistic 2-0 away win. So, gets punished for not backing his boys. He had picked Piro and Kundal to score. So does get his first point of the week by picking that goal scorer. The rest of us had all picked draws. I had gone for 2-2 on this one. Annoyingly, I had picked Tufan to score, so thought I was on for a first bonus point, but sadly he couldn't get there fast enough. Instead, Mr. Cabango.
If you were to believe the Hull City Facebook team, who refuse all season to acknowledge an own goal, they just picked the player that was nearest to the ball when it happened to go in the net. So they did put that it was Tufan, but every other outlet in the history of football that covers scores had it as a Cabango own goal, and having then seen the highlights, it definitely was an own goal.
Yes, sadly so. I had also picked Piro and Patterson to score for Swansea, so no points for me. They're just a point for the score, the result, not the score. Sorry. Both Matt and Andy had picked 1-1 draws, so get themselves 2 points for the correct score there. Matt had picked Traore to score for Hull and Piro to score for Swansea. Andy had gone for Longman to score for Hull, Cullen to score for Swansea, so sadly, no bonus points there. One final game of the week, just to wrap us up, and it was Middlesbrough's final away game of the season. In the regular season, obviously, we'll have one away game to play in the playoffs and another home game to play in the playoffs. But it took them over to South Yorkshire, where they took on Rotherham United at the New York Stadium. Some of the players that had rested against Luton earlier in the week before came back into the team, so Chuba was back in. Sadly, in this one, no Ryan Giles due to injury, so no high quality assists coming from down the left-hand side. Also, in the warm-up, Johnny Houghton was injured, so last minute replacement about 5 or 10 minutes before kick-off, where Mr. Houghton was had to be replaced by Paddy McNair. I think it kind of affected the team as they did look a little bit off the pace, somewhat. Had a nice early chance in the sort of the midway through the first half when Riley McGree, another player coming back into the team after a short injury layoff, broke down the left hand side, cut in towards the goal and tried to lift the ball over the keeper. Their centre half managed to get back on the line and just nip it away. And then that was kind of it for the first half until right deep into stoppage time when Rotherham broke through. Middlesbrough old boy Jordan Hugill was on the loose on the edge of the box and tried to break through and was brought down by Anthony Dykesteel. And the ref, despite there being 2 or 3 players around on the cover, deemed him to be the last man and gave him a straight red card. Having seen it, probably a bit harsh, but you can see why the ref's given it. He does kind of bundle him to the floor, not very slyly, shall we say. Definitely got a pull on his arm, and then he sort of like pretty much rugby tackles him to the floor.
So, straight red card, 3-game ban, that him out for the playoffs then?
Only a 1-game ban for some bizarre reason.
Was it before half time?
Yes.
So I think the cap though. So if it's before the first half, at the end, I think if it's before half time, then obviously they count the half as a larger punishment. So you could get sent off.
Yeah.
You could get sent off at 45 minutes, and like the referee, you get sent off. The ref turns around, blows his whistle, soz mate, kind of thing, and you could literally get sent off 10 seconds after the half-time whistle, and you'd be banned for 3 games because it's seen as not as much of a ban as being. I'm pretty sure that's the rule.
Interesting. But yes, he is only banned for 1 game, so in theory he'll only miss the last game of the season and he'll be back a bit available again for the players, which is good, as we're struggling with injuries at the moment. So into the first half, into the second half, obviously Middlesbrough down to 10 men, and they succumbed to a goal from a Dauphin, who was loose on the edge of the box and just angled the shot into the back of the net. And the game kind of petered out from there. Nothing really much else happened. No massive chances from what I can remember. There was an effort that came across the goal, and a Rotherham defender tried to get onto it, but kind of sliced it, and the keeper had to tip it round the post. That was about as close as Middlesbrough got to an equaliser. So this one panned out to a 1-0 Rotherham United win. That result meant that Middlesbrough could no longer go any higher in the table, so they are locked into a 4th place finish, regardless of what happens on the last day of the season against Coventry. From a predictions perspective, myself, Stu and Andy had all gone for Middlesbrough wins, so don't get any points there. I'd gone 3-0, so no need to give you any of the Middlesbrough scorers. Stuart had gone 1-2, with Ogbenny to score for Rotherham, Crooks and Barlaser to score for Middlesbrough, so no points there for him. Andy had gone 0-2, with Archer and Akpom to score, so again, no points there. Matt, on the other hand, had gone 2-1 to Rotherham, so gets himself a point for the correct result. Had gone Hugel and Ogbenny to score, with Muniz to score for the Borough. So just bags himself a bonus point there. So after the week, the 4 games, Stu, 1 point in total from the 4 games. Myself and Mr. Cook, 4 points, but Mr. Matt Moore, with that 1 point he gets for the Rotherham United win there, sneaks in at the last and takes the win for the week with 5 points. Well done to you, sir. So, brings us on to this week, where we've only got 4 games to go through, and then that number will drop off starting from next week, because obviously Hull will play their last game of the season. But before we get into that, we are just going to take a small break where we're going to, replenish our glasses, recharge our batteries, and then come straight back at you with week 38 predictions. Don't touch that dial. We'll be right back, yo.
Recording in progress.
Welcome back, ladies and germs. As we said, just got some 4 more games to cover. One thing I did forget to bring up at the end of the Rotherham game with the Borough was that the red card that was given to Anthony Dijksteel, 50-50 shot as to whether it could have been given. One decision that wasn't given was an absolutely horrendous challenge by a Middlesbrough player on Chidozie Ogbenny in the first half, which actually meant that he had to go off injured. And I don't even know if the ref must have given Hayden Hackney a yellow card, but it was an absolutely horrendous challenge. Nowhere near the ball, very, very late, very cynical, was very lucky to not get a red card. So, for all the Borough fans that were sort of complaining that, the card for Dijksteel wasn't fair, then I think they'll take it, because they definitely got away with one for Hayden Hackney. So, week 38, 4 games. The first of which involves Hull City. They travel to Luton Town, and there's not really anything on this game, as obviously Luton can't get any higher, they will be guaranteed to finish 3rd. Hull, I suppose, can maybe finish as high as...
I think it's only 1 place above where they are now, if I remember rightly.
So Hull, currently in 14th place.
Yeah, they'd need...
got a goal difference that's 11 worse than a team in 13th. So
But that team is Watford, and anything can happen when they play football, apparently. So,
well, this is true. So it's unlikely that Hull will move up. They'll only potentially move down, depending on if other results go that way. But they can only finish as low as 50
at worst. Yeah.
So it's not really the end of the world.
Progress from last year, still.
Yeah. I mean, you'd look at that as the positive. A higher finish than last season's finish is probably what they're playing for at this particular point.
Regardless, just as a side to the game that's coming up, regardless of it is great that they've finished higher and all the rest of it. The main thing about this season, I think, was that it was the first full season for the new ownership regime, and they came in with a lot of promise. And obviously, some of the transfers haven't worked out. You can't say that they haven't backed the club, and they've done their best to get people in. We've had crowds of over 20,000 again. Things still feel like they're going the right way, and I think that's probably the most important thing we'll take from this season, regardless of whether it's 14th or 15th.
Absolutely.
A derby game against Leeds next year would be nice. I'd take that, but.
I'm sure you're not the only one, sir.
They've got a footballing genius at the helm now, so there's no chance to get in.
That is true. Although I did look at his stats, and his last 4 games that he managed in the Premier Division, he lost all 4. So
I hope they've just got cameras watching him for if he's taking bribes from Steve Cooper, though, because he's prone to the old bribe.
Yeah, but that's only after he's having a pint of wine. So.
Gravy. I think it's not wine; it's gravy.
Apologies. So Luton Town versus Hull City. Obviously, it's Mr. Woodmansey's team, so he will go last. I'll just jump in straight away here. I've gone for a 1-1 draw on this one. I think Luton will rest players, as they don't really need to play them, or they might give some of their heavy hitters 45 minutes or so. So I've gone for Nakamba to score, which will be marvellous. No? I mean, that his name is Marvellous Nakamba. So. Oh, that is correct. That is the sound of millions turning off the podcast. And Slater to score for Hull City. That is my prediction. Mr. Moore, what have you got for this one?
I've gone for a 2-1 Luton win.
Okay. Goal scorers?
For momentum. Adebayo and Morris for Luton, and Tufan for Hull.
Mr. Cook?
1-0 Hull win.
0-1. Goal scorer?
Longman.
Obviously.
Yeah, I'm still struggling to find a Hull goal scorer I can rest on.
Dare I suggest this may be a game where some Ute gets blooded?
I don't know. I think it's possibly too late for some players, but I would have suggested that there'll be certain players, potentially the aforementioned Mr. Longman, who may feature, if fit, to potentially play for their place, because there are some people I would have thought that'll be getting chilled out over the summer. I don't know. He has obviously he's brought Harry Vaughan through recently. Not really sign of anybody else joining him on the bench, which you'd have thought, because we've had Nout to play for the last 4 games. He'd probably have started doing that earlier if he was going to do it. I don't know. I'm really not sure. But I personally, I don't think he will. I think he'll probably just stick to the same squad. If any, it'll be just one more. But yeah, we'll see. Score-wise, you've completely stepped on my toes for 3/4 of it, because I've gone for an optimistic, for me, 1-1 draw.
Okay.
I've got Adebayo for Luton, and newly named Player of the Season, or Players Player of the Season and Supporters Player of the Season because they had about 55 different awards. I feel like the whole, just sidetracking, I feel like the whole award ceremony was a bit like, here's a medal for just putting a shirt on this year, because every fucker seemed to get something. But yeah, so Supporters Player of the Year and Players Player of the Year, Regan Slater. And I would like to beat Luton. I still feel Draws optimistic, but Luton is just one of them teams, historically for Hull, that can just get in the fucking bin.
They have a long-standing dislike of each other with York City, which stems from their days in the National League together. York beat Luton in the semi-final of the playoffs one year, and the Luton fans reacted in a very nice way by storming the pitch and trying to get at the York City supporters that were in the stand, which was nice of them. So when York eventually went back up to the Football League and beat Luton in the playoff final, I think there was quite a lot of happy York supporters that day.
One of my favourite times in football, aside the first bit aside, so when Hull got promoted from I can't remember. It was part of the back-to-back promotions. Hull finished second, Luton finished first, and there was all this before the game. But again, the Luton fans not exactly being quiet about what had happened the season before. So living in the past. No mention to what had actually happened league-wise that season. Came to the KC at the time, absolutely full of themselves, and they were 3-0 down at half time, so and now I'm living in the past, I guess, so whatever.
So, Luton versus Hull, done and dusted. Our second game of the week takes us to the Riverside, where Middlesbrough take on Coventry City. Now, as the league table stands at the moment, that is fourth plays fifth. So if the table stays as it is, this will be the first of 3 consecutive games that these teams will play against each other. Obviously, it's my team, so I will go last. Andy, what have you got for this one?
It's a classic Borough scoreline for me. It's 2-0 to Borough. I'm rolling out the goal scoring duo of Archer and Chuba. I'm going to keep banging that drum until I finally get the perfect combination, and then I will retire both the score and the players.
Lovely stuff. Mr. Moore, what have you got for this one?
I've gone for a 2-1 Borough win.
Goal scorers, please.
Akpom and Archer. And Ukaresh. I just thought they got a bit of control over who they might face, and they might not want to face Coventry again.
Correct.
I
would not disagree with that at all. Stu?
I'm really sorry to have to tell you this, Paul, but they've not exactly proved themselves that much over the last 2 games. You said it yourself, injuries have crept in. I have a really... And again, I'm not saying this to be a twat to you, I have a really bad feeling about the next few weeks. And I have Middlesbrough down to lose 1-0 to a Jokeresh goal as well.
Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me. You always see that team that's sort of been like up there for the majority of the season and stuff like that, and they just completely run out of steam, and then they always end up shitting the bed in the playoffs. And I do worry that could potentially be the Borough this season. This is a tricky one because, in the same way as the Luton game, I don't think he'll go full strength because he'll want to keep something back in case they do have to play him another 2 times.
Mm-hmm.
But obviously then that comes with the problem that if you don't play the full strength side and then you get an absolute tonking, it gives them the impetus and the sort of the guile to go into the game into the first leg at least of the semi-final, riding the crest of a wave. They'll be well up for it. They know that a win locks up 5th place. No one else can catch them at that point. They'll be guaranteed to finish 5th, and they know exactly what they'll have to do for the next 2 games. So I think he will make changes, but I think he'll still go relatively strong. So I've gone for a 2-2 draw, which potentially opens the door for someone like a Millwall, a Sunderland. I'm just having a quick look at the table. So as it stands...
Or West Brom, dependent, but then goal difference will come into it, potentially.
Yeah, so as it stands, Coventry are 5th on 69 points. Millwall 6th in the last playoff spot on 68 points. We might get to them in a minute. Sunderland on 7th in 66, West Brom on 8th, 66, Blackburn on 9th, 66. So it's between those 5. So it's 2 from 5, basically. Coventry know exactly what they need to do.
What we're all hoping for, really, is that Middlesbrough beat Coventry. Those 3 teams all win. 4 teams on 69. You know. That's what it's all about.
There's no way it's going to be Blackburn because their goal difference is -3. So they're not going to get 5th. But they could sneak into 6th.
But Blackburn's task is made slightly easier. I say slightly, and I really do mean only slightly, in the fact that they are playing Millwall in the last game of the season, which again we might come to in a couple of minutes. So they only need, but basically Blackburn know exactly what they need to do. They need to win, and that eliminates Millwall from the sort of the argument there. And then it's just a case of they need to hope that neither Sunderland nor West Brom win their game, and then they'll automatically jump ahead of them. So there's all sorts of permutations that can come around and stuff like that. Coventry know, win, and they're in, and they'll play Borough for another 2 games in a row. So that's basically going to be their sort of like thought process. But yeah, I've gone 2-2. Obviously, Akpom's still on this run where he's scored in 9 consecutive home games, and I think they'll subconsciously within the club, well, maybe not even subconsciously, they'll want to keep that run going. So I think he'll start, and I have got him to score. So I've gone 2-2. I think they'll start Muniz over Archer as the central striker, so they can keep something in reserve for if they do end up playing him again, and then they won't sort of have seen how to play against him firsthand. So I've gone for Muniz and Akpom to score for the Borough, Gyökeres and Godden to score for Coventry. So that brings us to our 3rd game of the week, and as discussed, 3rd of 4 games. Yeah, that's correct. It involves Mr. Cook's team. Oh, no, that is right. So, obviously last week, Mr. Cook picked Millwall as his team of the week. So the way we're going to do things next season is that Andy will choose a team at the start of the season, and then under Mr. Woodmansey's suggestion, we're going to play winner stays on format. So Mr. Cook will pick his team at the start of next season. As long as that team keeps winning, we will keep picking their games. But as soon as they lose a game, the team that beats his team will become his new adopted team, and we then pick their game for the following week. So this was a little sort of like a little test run. So because Millwall won last week, Millwall get the pick again this week. So Millwall's game this week, as previously stated, is against Blackburn, and this is almost a win and in scenario for both teams. But it's pretty much a win and in for Millwall, definitely. So if Millwall win, they can't be caught by either Sunderland, West Brom or Blackburn. So Millwall's task is very simple: win, and they're in the playoffs in at least 6th position. Depending on how the result goes against Middlesbrough and Coventry, they can get as high as 5th. So watch this space for how that ends up. As it's technically,
we could get a podcast derby 2 times in a row.
Could indeed. So, Mr. Cook's team, he will therefore go last. Stu, what have you got for Millwall versus Blackburn?
Well, I made the mistake of picking no goals last week, and as you rightly stated, Millwall need to win, so I think they'll have a full strength squad, and who better to pick for a Millwall home game than Bradshaw.
You're going 1-0.
Yep, just the 1-0. I think it'll be a nervy affair, but I think they'll win. I have this feeling about that game that it potentially could be 1-0 within the first 5 or 10 minutes, and then it'll be shit your pants for the rest of it time. So let's see what happens.
You'll all be shocked to hear this is the game that Sky have picked for their coverage. Shock horror.
You mean that they're not covering Luton Hull? Come on.
No, I don't think so. Whilst I agree in that it'll be cagey, I think for this one, for Millwall, a draw isn't guaranteed to be enough, but in the grand scheme of things, might be enough. And I think with the fact that Blackburn are going to be pushing them all the way for the win that they absolutely have to get, I think that's where they're going to sort of cancel each other out. So I've gone for a 1-1 draw on this one. I've gone for Fleming to score for Millwall and Dolan to score for Blackburn. Matt, what have you got for this one?
I've gone for a 2-1 Blackburn win.
Ooh, interesting. Goal scorers?
Got Bradshaw for Millwall.
Yeah.
Gallagher.
Yeah.
And Brereton Diaz.
Yes, there it is.
I'm just willing this into existence because I just want another 2. Another podcast of me being able to say it.
Just for you, Mr. Moore, I have written him in the book as Brereton-Diaz.
Because that's his name.
Even though it pains me so to actually write it down. Go on then, Mr. Cook, tell us how your boys are going to get on this week.
Obviously, it's a 2-0 win.
Obviously. Goal scorers?
There's absolutely no way I'm not picking Watmore for a goal.
Obviously.
And I didn't want to just copy paste my last week's prediction, so I was like, best get me a different goal scorer, and I landed on Bennett.
Bennett?
As in Gordon.
Of course. So, 3 games down, 1 game to go, and I was going to say you could argue it's the most important game of the week, but I think that kind of has to go to Millwall versus Blackburn, really. But from a Premier League perspective, this is 100% the most important game of the week, as it seems Nottingham Forest take on, for all intents and purposes, already relegated Southampton. Southampton currently 6 points adrift at the bottom of the table, 4 games left to play. It's going to take something spectacular for them to get out of it at this particular point. And I think if Forest were to win this one, it would kind of all but relegate Southampton. So, well, let's wait and see. So it's obviously Mr. Moore's team. He will go last with a prediction. I'll jump in first. I think that Forest, given how well their home form has been, will be able to get the result they need here, and I've gone for a 1-0 win with Johnson to get the goal. Mr. Cook, what have you got here?
Just put some dittos down for that one, please.
And I reckon as well for Stu as well.
Yeah, have we all? Oh, there it is. 1-0 Johnson. 1-0 Johnson. In that case, we'll just dive straight over to potentially positive corner for the man himself and his team.
Yeah. I mean, the mistake that all of you have made is that Forest love to concede goals. But the fact that none of you have put down Forest to concede a goal is insanity, because there's going to be at least one. I've gone for a 2-1 Forest win.
Okay.
Because it's that kind of, yeah, who's more desperate? They're both as desperate as each other. Well, probably I would say, well, obviously Southampton are more desperate because they need to keep Forest in there. So, you know, so obviously the other week when we played Everton, I kind of made a comment of, yes, they're going to come and park the bus and hope that they don't lose at Forest and see if they can come away with points, and that's what they did. And Forest, of course, conceded 2 goals because, like I said, you guys are nuts for not putting a goal down for Southampton. But I think, like you said, at home there is that kind of like a little bit more encouragement. Danilo obviously went off injured, but apparently has been seen on the training pitch today. So the injury doesn't seem a bit of Cooper mind games is going. What you got to remember is Yatesy played as well at the weekend, so he might be back for the run-in for these last few games that might be key. Yeah, so I've gone 2-1. Awoniyi and Morgan Gibbs-White. Morgan Gibbs-White seems to have hit a scoring form as well. Awoniyi just is a threat. I mean, he's got a lot of kind of nice comments on Match of the Day as well, just about. And I think it's this kind of thing, like a lot of Forest fans are like, oh, he doesn't score much. All right, go and have a look at the strikers that we had last season, because Kieran Davis didn't score a whole lot of goals. I can't think who the striker was before him. You know, any striker that we had up front, the main guy, did not score many goals last season. That's not what he's there for. He's there to link up play, be a nuisance, keep the defenders occupied whilst the quicker, more skillful players do their thing. So yeah, Awoniyi and Morgan Gibbs-White, and then just because we love to concede free kicks and give stuff away from set pieces, Ward-Prowse.
It's very much a double-barrelled derby there, with Gibbs-White getting one for one team and Ward-Prowse.
I think if anybody's going to actually tune into that game, because I think it's on Sky as well, have your bingo cards ready, because I would imagine that at least 4 times before kick-off somebody is going to utter the phrase, every game from now till the end of the season is a cup final.
Also the eponymous relegation 6-pointer.
That's it. There's 2 of your 4 corners marked off already.
Yeah, exactly.
What we haven't mentioned is, for the first time in a while, all of our teams are playing on the same day, but on a Monday, bank holiday Monday.
Yeah. So
Forest couldn't have the common decency to start at 3 o'clock like everybody else that could take them.
So this is a strange one. So obviously, with the coronation of the new king falling on Saturday, we've all been given the bank holiday Monday to enjoy. Not going to turn it down. Lovely stuff.
Fresh from pledging your allegiance to him.
The Football League have decided, therefore, to use this opportunity to move the last round of fixtures for all of the EFL. So League 1 is being completed on Sunday. League 2 is being completed at 12:30 on Monday. And the Championship is being completed at 3 p.m. on Monday, with Nottingham Forest Southampton being the Monday night football offering, as it were.
I wonder if Sky gave them some extra sweet cash for that, because obviously 3 o'clock on a Saturday is the holy grail. You can't show football on TV at 3 o'clock on a Saturday.
So,
Sunday,
whilst that is true, apparently, I think it's Man City versus Leeds has been given the okay to be broadcast live on TV, and I think the argument they've managed to get around it because there's no
fucking games.
no other sort of like clashes of league fixtures, or outside of games in the Premier League. So the
royal decree.
Saturday 3 p.m. fixture will be on TV.
It's a royal decree, because if you're staunch anti-royalists, you're being punished by having to watch the white shite for a bit in the afternoon instead of watching the news.
You heard it here first, ladies and gentlemen. The white shite, apparently. Not a phrase I'd heard before, but might adopt it into everyday vernacular.
I mean, now that I've said it out loud again, you probably need to be a bit more careful with that these days. So obviously it was meant for the colour of the team. Disclaimer, not the views of CookieCast, etc., etc.
Correct. All of the above, definitely correct. So there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. That is the last regular season games for Hull, Middlesbrough, and of course Mr. Cook's adopted team of Millwall. There is a guaranteed 2 more games for Middlesbrough, and maybe 2 more games for Millwall, or indeed Blackburn, depending on how that result and other results go in the playoff race. As it's obviously pertinent to those games, I will give out the fixtures for the other teams that can get into the playoffs. So the other teams,
look. Sunderland are away at Preston.
They are indeed.
West Brom are away at Swansea.
City.
Two very similar fixtures in a way there, because that's like 2 teams gunning for the playoffs and 2 teams that are absolutely stuffed. So
yeah, well, it's weird, isn't it? Because technically, had Preston and Swansea got results that they needed at the weekend, that would have made it even more ridiculous.
Yeah,
weekend could literally have had another, and Norwich for that matter. If Norwich didn't get beaten by West Brom, they'd still be in with a shot. So this weekend could have been absolute carnage from a playoff perspective.
There's some absolutely belter games there though as well. Huddersfield, Reading, that's like relegation.
Yes, but Huddersfield have technically got a game. I don't know if it's tonight or Thursday.
Right.
So I think it's tomorrow. Yeah, Huddersfield versus Sheffield United is tomorrow. So if Huddersfield get as much as a point, they're safe.
Alright, you've got Wigan, Rotherham as well. That's obviously Wigan are down, but Rotherham could be.
If Rotherham hadn't beaten the Borough, they'd still be in with a chance of being relegated. So, it could have been like, you could have literally had maybe sort of like 2 games that had nothing riding on them at some point, had some of the fixtures not gone against sort of the teams in question. So they have it. We're getting to the business end of the season, as it was. So, as usual, thank you to these wonderful gentlemen for joining me to take you through the murky depths of the footballing world. Join us again next week, where we'll find out who Middlesbrough's 2 playoff semi-finals will be against in the upcoming weeks. We'll see just where Hull finished in the table, and we'll see whether Andy's having to support his Bermondsey boys, or if he's had to take a Blackburn approach, potentially, for the playoffs. For all that and more, join us again next week, ladies and gentlemen. But for now, it's tatty bye, au revoir.
So there we go, what do you think of that? Like I said before, season is coming to a close. What will we do without football? I can't imagine there won't be much football for very long. But we'll see. Big thank you for listening. Big thank you for watching. Before you go, please do consider like, share, subscribe and comment. Leave us a review. Check out the website, thecookiecast.com. The social media links and an email button there. That way you can get in touch with us. That's it for this one. Until next time, I'm going to say bye. And I'll see you then.
Thank you for listening to these grumpy old men talk about football. If you've enjoyed this episode, please like, share and subscribe.